The silver coins slid into her palm, cold and heavy, and in that moment she realized silence could be bought. But survival had already been paid for in blood and fear. What the man standing before her didn't know was that she had survived worse than him, and the town that thought it had buried her story was about to feel the ground move. Her name was Eliza Rowan, and the Wild West had taught her early that truth was a dangerous thing. It had taken her parents first, killed by a lie spoken too loudly to the wrong man. It had taken her childhood next, hardening her before she ever learned softness. By 19, Eliza understood how power worked in frontier towns. Men with money spoke, men with guns enforced, and women learned to endure. The night her silence was bought, the saloon smelled of smoke, sweat, and spilled whiskey. Laughter rolled like thunder from one end of the room to the other, careless and cruel. Eliza stood near the back wall, her hands clasped tight enough to hurt, eyes lowered the way she'd learned kept trouble away. But trouble had already found her. She had seen something she was never meant to see, an argument that turned violent behind the saloon, a man beaten and left to die, the attacker riding away thinking the darkness had swallowed all witnesses. It hadn't. The man who bought her silence was not the attacker, but he was close enough to the truth to fear it. Nathan Cole was a cattle trader with connections that reached beyond the town limits. He was respected, feared, and protected. And when word reached him that a quiet girl had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, he acted swiftly. Money spoke louder than threats. He found her the next morning, alone near the boarding house where she cleaned rooms for coin and crusts of bread. He didn't touch her, didn't raise his voice. He simply explained what would happen if she talked, and what would happen if she didn't. Then he paid her. "You'll leave town," he said. "Go west, start fresh, forget what you saw." Eliza looked at the coins in her hand. Enough to travel, enough to live for a while, enough to disappear. "I'll be quiet," she said. Nathan Cole nodded, satisfied. Like most men who bought silence, he assumed it meant obedience. He was wrong. Eliza left town that afternoon, riding in the back of a supply wagon headed toward a struggling ranch on the edge of nowhere. The ranch belonged to a man named Samuel Reed, poor, widowed, and known for keeping to himself. He needed help. She needed distance. Samuel didn't ask questions. He showed her where she'd sleep, where food was kept, and how the land worked. His kindness was quiet, almost apologetic, as if he expected her to vanish the way everyone else eventually did. Eliza stayed. The work was hard but honest. She rose before dawn, learned the land, learned the cattle, learned the rhythms of survival that didn't depend on secrets or threats. Silence followed her there too, but it was different. It wasn't imposed, it was chosen. And in that silence she healed. Months passed. Eliza grew stronger, surer. She spoke when necessary, listened always. She noticed things Samuel missed, where water pooled after storms, which cattle were sick before symptoms showed, which traders cheated and which were fair. Slowly, the ranch stabilized. Samuel noticed. "You've got a good head," he said one evening as they watched the sun sink low over the plains. "I've had to," she replied. Trouble has a way of circling back. The man who had been left for dead behind the saloon hadn't died after all. He limped into another town weeks later and told his story. Names were whispered, fingers pointed. The truth, half buried, began clawing its way back to the surface. Nathan Cole heard the rumors and panicked. He rode hard to Samuel's ranch one dusty afternoon, his presence like a shadow stretching across the land. Eliza recognized him instantly. Her chest tightened, but she didn't run. "You promised silence," he said when he found her alone by the barn. "I gave it," she replied calmly. "You're still breathing," he snapped. "That's not the same thing." Samuel appeared then, stepping between them without knowing why. "She's under my roof," he said. "You've said your piece. Now leave." Nathan laughed, but it lacked confidence. "You have no idea what you're protecting." Eliza stepped forward, I do. That night she didn't sleep. The past pressed in, demanding reckoning. Eliza realized then that silence had saved her life, but it was no longer enough. The truth was bigger than her fear now, bigger than one man's money. She rode back to town at dawn. People stared. Some recognized her. Whispers followed her footsteps like ghosts. Eliza walked straight to the sheriff's office and told her story slowly, clearly, without embellishment or apology. She named names. She described what she saw. She handed over the coins Nathan Cole had paid her. The sheriff listened. By noon, the town was buzzing. Nathan Cole was arrested that evening. So was the man who'd done the beating. The saloon emptied early. Businesses closed. People gathered in knots, voices hushed, faces pale. The town had been built on unspoken agreements, on silence bought and sold. Eliza had shattered that economy. Some called her brave, others called her foolish, a few called her dangerous. Samuel stood beside her through it all, silent but steady. When the trial came, Eliza testified. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. She didn't look at Nathan Cole. She didn't need to. Her words carried weight on their own. The verdict sent shockwaves through the region. Men who'd thought themselves untouchable found themselves watched. Deals made in shadows were dragged into daylight. The town changed, not overnight but irrevocably. Eliza returned to the ranch afterward, unsure what awaited her. What she found was peace. Samuel never asked her why she'd stayed silent so long. He only said, "You did what you had to do, then you did what was right." Years later, travelers would still speak of the girl who broke a town with the truth she'd been paid to bury. They would say she'd been weak once, bought and frightened. They were wrong. She had been surviving. And when she chose to speak, the Wild West listened. Because silence may be bought, but strength, once earned, belongs to no one but the woman who survived long enough to use it. The town did not heal quietly after that. Eliza learned quickly that truth, once spoken, does not simply settle, it ripples. It disturbed old alliances, unsettled comfortable lies, and forced people to confront how much they had ignored for the sake of peace. The jailhouse stayed fuller than it ever had. Men who once laughed loudest in the saloon now kept their heads down. Women who had learned to swallow their stories began to look at Eliza differently, not with pity, but with recognition. And recognition is powerful. At first, Eliza stayed close to the ranch, helping Samuel mend fences and tend cattle. Keeping her distance from town, she told herself it was temporary, that once things cooled down, life would return to something resembling normal. But normal had shifted. She could feel it every time a rider stopped by just to nod at her, every time a trader spoke more carefully, every time a woman lingered a moment longer, as if deciding whether to speak. One afternoon, a girl barely 16 arrived at the ranch gate. Her dress was torn at the hem, her eyes too old for her face. "They said you'd understand," the girl whispered. Eliza did. She brought her inside, fed her, listened without interrupting. The story was different in detail, but the same in shape. Power misused, silence demanded, fear enforced. Eliza didn't promise revenge. She didn't promise miracles. She promised truth. Word spread not loudly but steadily. The ranch became a place of quiet refuge, not a hiding place but a pause, a place where women could speak without being rushed or dismissed. Eliza learned how to guide them, how to document, how to remember clearly, how to decide for themselves whether to speak publicly or protect their peace. Samuel watched it all with a mix of awe and concern. "You're carrying a lot," he said one night as they sat under a sky crowded with stars. "I carried it alone before," Eliza replied. "This is lighter." But danger does not surrender easily. Nathan Cole's arrest had angered powerful men beyond the town, men who profited from silence and feared what Eliza represented. Threats came next. Anonymous notes. Riders lingering too long at the edge of the property. Once, A shot fired into the air after dark. Samuel wanted to send her away, somewhere safer, somewhere quieter. Eliza shook her head. Running is what they expect. The real test came when the courthouse burned. No one was hurt, but records were lost, names, dates, testimonies. It was meant as a warning. The town gathered in stunned silence, smoke still curling into the dawn sky. Eliza stood among them. "This is why silence was bought," she said calmly, "because truth scares people who depend on darkness." Her voice did not tremble. Others spoke then, not all at once, but enough. Enough that rebuilding the records became a shared effort instead of a solitary risk. Testimonies were rewritten from memory. Names were spoken again. What the fire destroyed, community restored. The men behind it were never officially named. They didn't need to be. The town had changed its posture. It no longer bowed its head so easily. Years passed. The ranch grew stronger, not just in cattle and crops, but in meaning. Samuel and Eliza's partnership deepened, not born of rescue or obligation, but of mutual choice. They married quietly, without spectacle, without pretending the past had never existed. Sometimes on long evenings, Samuel would ask, "Do you regret taking the money?" Eliza would think before answering, "No, it bought me time. Time saved my life." And speaking later, he asked. She would smile, slow and certain. That saved everyone else. Travelers still told the story, though it changed with each telling. Some said she was fearless. Others said reckless. Some said she was the bravest woman the West had ever known. Eliza never corrected them. She knew the truth. She had been afraid, she had been silent, she had survived. And when she finally chose to speak, she didn't just shake a town, she taught it how to stand. Because in the Wild West, silence could be bought. But survival, once turned into courage, could change everything.